What happens when a Hollywood event built on elegance, quiet prestige, and decades of cinematic reverence suddenly erupts into chaos the moment one unexpected figure steps out of a black SUV? What happens when that figure isn't a movie icon, a surprise honoree, or an A-lister making a comeback, but a woman whose arrival triggers something brutal, immediate, and deafening? Imagine this. The cameras are rolling. The audience is gathered. The industry elites are settling into that familiar pre-ceremony buzz. And then, out of nowhere, the atmosphere snaps in half. A ripple moves through the crowd. Heads turn. Phones rise. Security stiffens. And before anyone can process what they're seeing, the sound erupts. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Booing. Loud. Unified. Echoing off the walls of the American Cinematheque venue like someone cracked open a stadium instead of a red carpet. Now here's the question. What did Meghan Markle expect when she stepped out of that car? A wave of applause? A line of flashbulbs desperate for her arrival? Or a warm Hollywood welcome that would overwrite every scandal, every misstep, every accusation hanging over her brand like a storm cloud? Because what she got instead was raw, visceral public rejection. And it didn't just happen, it detonated. You'll hear people say Hollywood is forgiving, that the industry loves a comeback, that the right outfit, the right pose, the right PR narrative can erase years of controversy. But what happened that night didn't look like forgiveness. It didn't look like curiosity. It didn't even look like restrained discomfort. It looked like a verdict. And it happened within seconds. But let's slow this moment down. Let's play it like a scene. Let's analyze the beats, the energy, the psychology. The black SUV pulls up. The door cracks open. A flash of emerald fabric catches the light. A familiar silhouette steps out. And then, before her foot even hits the ground, the crowd recognizes her. Meghan Markle. Now, depending on where you stand in this entire saga, that name brings up different emotions. Some see a misunderstood woman trying to reclaim her narrative. Some see a master manipulator who believes every space is her stage. And others, quite a lot of others, apparently, see a symbol of entitlement, hypocrisy, or self-inflicted drama. But the American Cinematheque Awards? This wasn't her turf. This wasn't an event built around royal gossip or Netflix drama. This wasn't a panel discussion about activism or a premiere for a documentary. This was Hollywood's safe space, an annual tribute to genuine cinematic artistry, where actors, directors, writers, and producers gather to celebrate the craft, not the chaos. So ask yourself, why would Meghan show up to an event she wasn't scheduled to attend? Why would she attempt a red carpet entrance? Why now? Why here? Why this? Because the timing matters. The location matters. The symbolism matters. And Meghan Markle knows the power of a well-timed spectacle. But Hollywood also knows the difference between earned attention and forced attention. And on the night of the 2025 American Cinematheque Awards, that difference became painfully clear. Witnesses say Meghan stepped out of the car with a look that suggested she expected cameras to immediately begin snapping. She paused, deliberately, chin lifted, shoulders back. That signature half-smile, the one she uses when she wants to appear composed yet superior. And for half a second, there was silence. Half a second. Then the boos hit. Not scattered, not from a few unhappy attendees, but loud and widespread, like a rolling thunderclap. And what's fascinating is how quickly the energy changed. People who weren't even looking in her direction turned their heads the moment they heard it. Couples stopped talking. Security guards exchanged glances. Even the photographers, those famously stone-faced, unshakable professionals, hesitated. What does it take to make a red carpet's most hardened observers freeze? What does it take for industry insiders, people used to scandals, egos, meltdowns, to look genuinely stunned? Because that's what eyewitnesses said. They weren't just surprised Meghan arrived. They were stunned by the reaction. And here's the twist most people won't admit. The reaction said more about Hollywood than it did about Meghan. Hollywood is many things: glamorous, ruthless, political, performative. But when it comes to authenticity, when it comes to respecting the space, when it comes to honoring a night that belongs to the craft and not to controversy, Hollywood has boundaries. Meghan crossed one. And that's why the boos weren't casual. They weren't confused. They weren't mild. They were decisive. But here's where the story gets even more intense, because Meghan didn't simply stand there and absorb the shock. She didn't retreat. She didn't nod politely and exit the scene. She didn't walk away like someone who recognized a mistake. No, she moved forward, purposely, directly, toward the red carpet, toward the velvet ropes, toward the photographers who were already lowering their cameras in disbelief. And that's where the real conflict began, not the booze, but the moment Meghan allegedly demanded entry. Demanded, not requested, not inquired, not clarified, demanded. And if you're thinking, surely she wouldn't do that, then stick around, because what happened next wasn't just awkward. It wasn't just embarrassing. It wasn't just a miscalculation. It was a meltdown of entitlement colliding with an institution that wasn't having it. Event staff, who had been briefed, trained, and prepared for a smooth, prestigious, tightly choreographed night, were suddenly thrown into chaos. You could see the confusion on their faces. You could practically hear the internal monologue. Why is she here? Who approved this? What is she trying to do? Security stepped forward. Meghan stepped closer. Her team hovered behind her, whispering, gesturing, trying to salvage the moment. Photographers exchanged looks that only one emotion could explain. This was not supposed to happen. And the crowd? They sensed the tension instantly. Their boos didn't soften over time. They grew louder, sharper, more defined, almost like the public was drawing a line in real time. That's enough. Not tonight. Not here. It wasn't political. It wasn't royalist versus anti-royalist. It wasn't about race, gender, or titles. It was about space, about boundaries, about a woman trying to insert herself into an event that wasn't designed for spectacle, but suddenly became one because of her arrival. And here's the eerie part. Witnesses say the louder the boos grew, the more Meghan's expression shifted. First confusion, then disbelief, then irritation, and finally, something colder, determination. But why? Why insist on entering a space that clearly didn't want her? Was it a publicity move gone wrong? Was it an attempt to overshadow a more successful actress being honored? Was it a strategy to force headlines? Or was it something deeper, something rooted in identity, ego, or the need for validation? Because Meghan's relationship with Hollywood has always been complicated. She came from it. She left it. She returned to it. She criticizes it. She depends on it. She wants its approval. She resents its judgment. And this moment, this explosive, humiliating, unexpected moment, feels like the culmination of that entire tension boiling to the surface. Remember, this wasn't a fan event. This wasn't a talk show taping. This wasn't a premiere for one of her projects. This was a night honoring people with decades of work behind the camera and on the screen. A night where your name appears on a guest list because you earned it, not because you decided to show up. And deep down, Meghan knows how Hollywood works. She understands the politics of fame. She knows the significance of arriving at an event you're not invited to. So why do it anyway? Why risk the humiliation? Why challenge the system so publicly? Was she expecting to charm her way in? Was she expecting the cameras to turn in her favor? Was she expecting the crowd to shift once she started walking? Because if that was the plan, it backfired spectacularly. But the most shocking part of this night isn't just the booze. It isn't even the confrontation that followed. It isn't the leaked memo. It isn't the footage that went viral. It's what Meghan tried to do after being refused entry. Because what happened next was not only bold, it was desperate, shocking, almost cinematic in its audacity. And the moment her team realized what she was attempting, panic, real panic. Calls were made. Security tightened. Staff scrambled. Guests murmured. Reporters braced their cameras. And Meghan Markle? She wasn't done. Not even close. Because in her mind, this night still held a moment, a spotlight she believed she could reclaim. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What makes a night unforgettable? Is it the honorees, the speeches, the cinematic legends walking into the glow of the cameras? Or is it the moment something happens that absolutely wasn't supposed to happen? Something that rips through the planned elegance of the evening like a rogue wave crashing into a quiet shore? Because that's what this night became. A rupture. A pivot point. A before and after moment in Hollywood's collective memory. And the strangest part? No one inside the building had the faintest idea of what was brewing outside. Not yet. Not until the energy shifted so violently that even seasoned producers felt their stomachs flip. But let's rewind. Let's build the scene. Let's walk into this chapter like you're stepping into the venue yourself. Picture this. You're on Hollywood Boulevard, standing under the marquee lights that have seen decades of film history, decades of legends, decades of quiet, respectful ceremony. The American Cinematheque Awards aren't like the Oscars, where chaos is expected. They aren't like the Emmys, where surprises are engineered. They aren't like splashy film premieres where stunts and publicity gimmicks thrive. This night is calm, deliberate, prestigious. A night for craft, not clout. A night for film, not fame chasing. A night for industry respect, not social media storms. This is the event Hollywood insiders attend when they want a break from the circus of celebrity culture. This is where the real backbone of the industry gathers. Cinematographers who shaped the last 20 years of blockbuster visuals. Editors whose pacing changed modern storytelling. Actors who paid their dues through decades of work before finally earning recognition. Do you see the contrast forming already? This night is about discipline. Meghan Markle is about disruption. This night is about honoring peers. Meghan is about commanding attention. This night values humility. Meghan performs visibility. And that's why, before she even arrived, something in the air felt slightly different. Guests arrived earlier than usual. Security was more alert than usual. The press line was thicker than usual. The energy was tighter, sharper, almost on edge. Why? Because whispers were circulating. Whispers that someone unexpected was planning to show up. Someone not on the formal list. Someone whose name was causing quiet eye rolls among the publicists huddled near the entrance. But those whispers were dismissed the way you dismiss a rumor that feels too absurd to be true. After all, why would Meghan Markle choose a night like this, of all nights, to insert herself into the Hollywood bloodstream? Why pick the one event that has never revolved around her? Why pick a night dedicated to sincerity rather than spectacle? Why pick an industry ceremony that values consistency, not chaos? And more importantly, why pick a night where she wasn't invited? Ask yourself that. Because the answer becomes more explosive chapter by chapter. Inside the venue, meanwhile, the atmosphere was warm and traditional. You could feel the weight of cinema history floating in the air. Small clusters of actors mingled near the bar.
Directors brushed shoulders with writers they once collaborated with a decade ago. Producers exchanged quiet greetings instead of loud, performative hellos. This night is a sanctuary for Hollywood, a reprieve from drama, a break from scandal. Before Meghan arrived, you could practically feel the harmony. But every sanctuary has its fragility, and every fragile moment can be shattered. Let's talk about the honoree that night, because here's another twist. The honoree matters. Why?
Because Meghan's arrival wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was happening against the backdrop of a career-defining tribute for someone who had spent decades earning the respect Meghan keeps trying to demand. The honoree's story was one of grit, not glamour. Persistence, not privilege. Talent, not theatrics. And that contrast matters. Hollywood respects struggle. Hollywood respects craft. Hollywood respects people who pay their dues without needing the spotlight to love them back. So when someone shows up trying to hijack that night, trying to redirect attention, trying to insert themselves into a narrative that has nothing to do with them, Hollywood reacts. Hard. Let's dig deeper into the cinematic culture behind the event. The American Cinematheque Awards aren't televised for mass entertainment. They aren't orchestrated for trending hashtags. They're intimate. The audience actually watches the tributes. They listen. They reflect. They celebrate artistry. Not relevance. Not scandal. Not branding. This is why Meghan's decision to appear unannounced was so jarring. Think of it like someone barging into a graduation ceremony wearing a sequin dress while everyone else is in black gowns. Think of it like crashing a funeral with a camera crew. Think of it like showing up to a meditation retreat with a megaphone. Wrong tone. Wrong moment. Wrong energy. And the crowd felt it instantly. That's the thing about these industry spaces. They may look glamorous from the outside, but on the inside, they run on unspoken rules. Rules Meghan either didn't understand or didn't care to understand. But before we get into motives, before we dissect her choices, we need to analyze how the night unfolded without her. Because the timeline before her arrival creates the perfect emotional contrast for everything that came afterward. Inside, people were laughing softly between sips of wine. Outside, the press line was buzzing in a calm, controlled rhythm. Flashes popped at predictable intervals. Publicists monitored their clients. Security kept a watchful, steady eye. This tranquility is important, because when tranquility breaks, it breaks fast. And when Meghan's SUV turned the corner, that break began. But I want you to pause with me for a moment. Do you ever feel a shift in the air before a storm hits? Do you ever sense tension before anyone says a word? Do you ever witness a room change temperature just because a certain person walked in? That's what happened the second her vehicle rolled up. Security stiffened before they even saw who was inside. Photographers raised their eyebrows. Publicists exchanged confused looks, as if asking silently, "Did you approve this? Did someone else?" Even the crowd, composed of fans, cinephiles, and industry staff, started murmuring. Something was off. Something didn't fit. And here's where the contradictions start to build. This was a prestigious night, yet chaos was approaching. This was a night meant to celebrate another celebrity, yet Meghan was trying to rewrite the script. This was a night where everything was planned, yet the plan was about to implode. And here's the emotional beat. Hollywood hates unpredictability when they're trying to uphold tradition. They embrace it in film. They reward it in performances. They cherish it in stories. But in real life? At formal events? At ceremonies built on respect and protocol? Unpredictability is unwelcome. And Meghan? She thrives on unpredictability, at least publicly. Inside the venue, the honoree was in the middle of greeting studio executives. There were quiet jokes, soft applause, nostalgic stories being shared. Meanwhile, outside, her SUV slowed to a stop. Every disaster, every scandal, every iconic Hollywood meltdown begins with a moment like this. A single still frame, a single hinge, a single breath before everything swings violently in a new direction. The hinge moment was that car door, because once it cracked open, there was no turning back for anyone. Not the organizers, not the press, not the crowd, and certainly not Meghan. Before that moment, the night was ordinary. After that moment, the night became legendary for all the wrong reasons. And what's astonishing is this. The American Cinematheque Awards do not want viral moments. They do not want celebrity stunts. They do not want trending controversies. The event prides itself on being timeless, not timely. Classic, not chaotic. Focused, not flashy. Which makes what happened next even more shocking. Because while everyone inside was savoring one of the calmest nights on the Hollywood calendar, the storm outside was already forming. The crowd outside didn't know what they were about to witness. Security didn't know what they were about to manage. Staff didn't know what they were about to deny. But the moment that door opened, the moment her shoe touched the pavement, the moment her posture straightened like she was preparing to be photographed, something snapped in the collective energy of the crowd, as if they all, simultaneously, recognized the audacity of the act. As if they all, simultaneously, realized this wasn't a coincidence. And that's why the boos came so quickly. Because whether people love her or hate her, whether they defend her or criticize her, everyone understood one thing. She was trying to make this night about her. And Hollywood had a very different reaction planned. But before we go deeper into the explosion, before we break down how the crowd shifted from shock to anger, we need to understand Meghan's mindset. Because the truth is, she didn't arrive here by accident. She didn't choose this event randomly. She didn't misread the invitation system. She didn't just show up. No, Meghan came with intention. But that intention would soon meet its match. Because what came next wasn't just resistance. It was public rejection on a scale she never anticipated. And it all started with the moment she stepped forward, directly into the crowd's judgment. But as shocking as the boos were, they were nothing compared to the demand she made next. A demand that would ignite the chaos and push the night over the edge. Have you ever seen a moment so instantly explosive that it feels like the world inhales all at once, holds its breath, and then releases everything in a single, brutal wave? That's what happened the second the handle on Meghan Markle's SUV clicked and the door began to nudge open. It didn't swing wide. It didn't burst dramatically. It slid outward slowly, almost theatrically, like someone trying to control the reveal of a magic trick. But this wasn't magic. This was a collision. Tell me something. Have you ever watched someone walk directly into a storm they didn't realize was already brewing? Or worse, walk into one they thought they could control? Because that's exactly what this looked like. The moment that car door cracked open, the entire atmosphere around the American Cinematheque venue seemed to shift. Everything became tighter, sharper. The crowd's murmurs softened into a low hum of anticipation. Photographers instinctively angled their lenses. Security's stance stiffened. Even the people who weren't looking in her direction turned their heads, as if some instinct told them they were about to witness something unforgettable. Meghan didn't step out immediately. She paused inside the vehicle, just long enough to create tension, intentional or not. That pause mattered. It acted like a drum roll. And every second that passed, 1, 2, 3, amplified the energy around the car. Then the shoe appeared. A perfectly polished heel, stepping onto concrete like it belonged on a red carpet, not a blocked-off driveway outside one of Hollywood's most respected venues. Her leg followed, then the sharp silhouette of her dress, then the body posture that said everything you needed to know. Chin up, shoulders back, expression neutral but poised, like someone expecting to be greeted with flashbulbs. And then the booze hit. Not delayed, not subtle, not hesitant. Instant. The sound erupted like someone detonated a massive speaker system aimed directly at her. It was sharp, unified, and shockingly loud. A boom of disapproval that seemed to shake the air itself. Eyewitnesses said it felt like the sound bounced off every nearby surface and came crashing back onto the crowd. Even seasoned press photographers, people who have seen divorces, breakdowns, meltdowns, and public scandals, froze. Think about that. When photographers freeze, you know something rare is happening. And Meghan? She was halfway out of the car when it hit. Her foot stopped mid-step. Her posture paused. Her face, which had been arranged into that calm, regal neutrality, tightened just a fraction. Not enough for her to lose composure, but enough to show she didn't see this coming. That micro-expression told the whole story. Shock, confusion, embarrassment. Then, quickly, attempted control. She stepped out fully, closing the door behind her with a deliberate motion, as if she believed she could force the situation back into her narrative. But the crowd didn't soften. They grew louder. Every step she took forward made the reaction harsher. Every inch she moved made the energy more intense. The booing wasn't just noise, it was a message, and it was clear she understood it. Let's zoom out for a moment. You've seen Meghan at public events before. She's accustomed to reactions. Good and bad. She's faced criticism, controversy, mixed opinions. But this wasn't mixed. This wasn't divided. This wasn't fragmented. This was unanimous. And it felt almost symbolic. Like a public response to years of strained narratives. Like a culmination of fatigue. Like Hollywood saying, not tonight. Not here. But here's where the contradiction kicks in. Despite the hostility, Meghan didn't retreat. She didn't step back into the SUV. She didn't motion for her team to regroup. She moved forward. Why? This is where psychology enters the picture. Meghan has always believed in confidence as a weapon, in posture as persuasion, in performance as power. And in her mind, stepping back might have signaled defeat. Retracting might have confirmed the narrative that she wasn't welcomed in Hollywood anymore. Retreating would have handed the moment to the crowd. So she pushed forward, shoulders squared, chin raised, the famous half-smile returning like armor. And the crowd responded to that shift. The booing not only continued, it intensified. Louder, sharper, more aggressive. You know how a crowd becomes a single organism in moments like this? How humans pick up on collective cues. That's exactly what happened. The moment Meghan tried to assert control, the crowd asserted dominance. People who had been quiet chimed in. People who had been watching from a distance moved closer. Even guests who had no interest in the drama found themselves pulled into the moment. Hollywood loves a spectacle, but Hollywood hates an unwanted spectacle. Meanwhile, Meghan's security team, who had originally been standing back, suddenly flanked her closely. Not out of fear for her safety, but out of fear of her unpredictability. You could see it in their body language. Their steps were tighter. Their glances were sharper. Their whispers became more urgent. They didn't like where this was heading. They didn't like that she was moving closer to the red carpet. They didn't like the audience's reaction. But Meghan? She didn't slow down. This raises a question you have to ask yourself. Was she genuinely shocked by the crowd, or was she trying to override it? Because the way she moved, slow, deliberate, almost regal, felt like someone trying to force a moment into the narrative they wished they could control. Think about how many times Meghan has walked toward cameras with that same posture. Controlled, measured, confident. But confidence without context becomes arrogance. And that's what the crowd responded to. Every step she took seemed to anger them more. By the time she reached the perimeter of the red carpet, the booing was a wall of sound. A wall she walked straight into. And here's where things hit a new level of chaos. Photographers, who normally take photos no matter what, lowered their cameras, not because they didn't want the shot, but because they were confused. Why was she here? Who approved this? Why was she approaching the carpet when she wasn't expected? Publicists who specialize in damage control exchanged nervous looks. Some began whispering urgently. Others pulled out their phones to text their clients inside the venue, warning them that something strange was unfolding at the main entrance. Meanwhile, event staff began shifting around uncomfortably. You could practically see the dread on their faces. They recognized her immediately, but they also recognized the problem. She wasn't on the list. She wasn't scheduled for an appearance. And the crowd's reaction meant that allowing her onto the carpet would blow the entire event off course. One staff member tried to step forward to intercept her, but the moment he did, Meghan's security positioned themselves between him and her. Not aggressively, but firmly enough to create tension. This is where it becomes cinematic. The kind of moment directors dream about capturing on film. The staffer trying to do his job. The security trying to protect their client. The crowd roaring behind them. The photographers frozen in disbelief. And Meghan moving through it like she expected the world to part for her. Her expression didn't falter. But her eyes? They revealed something deeper. A mix of defiance and desperation. A determination to be seen. A refusal to accept rejection. Almost like she believed walking forward would force the moment to bend to her will. But reality was about to bend her instead. Because just as she reached the edge of the carpet, just as she lifted her chin a fraction higher, just as the cameras adjusted in confusion, something happened that shifted the entire tone of the night. Someone in the crowd shouted something. A sentence. A sharp, brutal line that cut through the noise and made Meghan's entire posture stiffen. And the crowd reacted instantly. They didn't just boo. They screamed. They roared. They laughed. They seized the moment like a spark hitting dry brush. Whatever the person said, it hit her. Hard. Witnesses say her face froze. Not for long, just for a second. But long enough to show that the reaction finally pierced through the performance. And that's when the real chaos began. Because instead of retreating, instead of regrouping, instead of reassessing the situation, Meghan made a choice. She stepped toward the red carpet like she intended to walk onto it. Toward an entrance she wasn't invited to. Toward an event that didn't want her. Toward a space that symbolized everything Hollywood was trying to protect from her brand. And that step changed everything. Because the moment she tried to push forward, someone stepped forward to stop her. Someone she never expected. Someone whose presence would send a shockwave through the already chaotic scene. But what happened when that person stepped in would turn the entire energy of the night into something even more volatile. Something no one could have predicted. And something Meghan could not walk away from. Have you ever watched someone charge straight toward a wall fully convinced that if they walk confidently enough, the wall will simply step aside? That was Meghan Markle in this moment. The instant she took that final, decisive step toward the American Cinematheque red carpet. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't cautious. It was a step that said, "Let me through. This is my moment. I belong here." But belonging isn't about belief. It's about reality. And reality was about to hit her harder than the booze did. The red carpet wasn't just a rug rolled out for glamour. It was a carefully controlled, protected, choreographed space. A living, breathing part of the event. Every person on that carpet had been approved, timed, and placed with the precision of a military operation. Publicists knew exactly when their clients were supposed to arrive. Security had every name memorized. Photographers had shot lists. The staff had every movement pre-planned. And then Meghan walked toward it as if the rules didn't apply to her. Let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what kind of mindset does it take to walk directly into an event you weren't invited to? And then attempt to enter the most curated part of it? Is it confidence? Is it delusion? Is it strategy? Is it desperation? Maybe it's all of the above. Because Meghan didn't hesitate. Not when the booing intensified. Not when her team whispered urgently behind her. Not when security subtly attempted to guide her back toward the SUV. She kept moving. Her posture sharpened. Her chin lifted another inch. Her expression smoothed into that practiced, controlled half-smile. Calm on the surface, but tight around the eyes. The kind of expression people wear when they're trying to project serenity while panic simmers underneath. And then, right at the cusp of the carpet, right where photographers stand shoulder to shoulder, where flashes normally explode like fireworks, Meghan stopped. Not because she wanted to, but because event staff stepped directly into her path. A single staff member stood there first. A young man in a black suit, headset in place, clipboard in hand. You could see the dread on his face. He knew exactly who he was blocking. He also knew exactly what the protocol demanded. He lifted his hand slightly, palm out, the universal signal for stop. Not here. Not now. Meghan barely glanced at him. She stepped forward again. The staffer stepped forward too, blocking her again, this time with more firmness. Meghan's smile dropped. One of her security guards leaned in, murmuring something low, trying to de-escalate the situation. But Meghan didn't look at them. She kept her gaze fixed on the red carpet, as if she believed she was seconds away from forcing the event into acknowledging her presence. And then came the moment, the one that would define the entire confrontation. She spoke, not loudly, not aggressively, but with a tone that carried enough entitlement to cut through the surrounding chaos like a hot blade. Let me through. 3 words. Calm, sharp, authoritative. Let me through. Not a request. Not a check-in. Not a polite inquiry. A demand. The staffer blinked, caught between disbelief and professionalism. He repeated, I'm sorry, Ms. Markle. This event is only for credentialed guests. You're not on the list. The crowd roared with a mix of approval, laughter, and chants. It was brutal. It was humiliating. It was loud enough that Meghan visibly tensed. Her eyes narrowed. And here's where the contradiction becomes almost poetic. Meghan built her brand on advocating for compassion. But compassion evaporates when entitlement takes over. She stepped even closer to the staffer, closing the gap between them. And with a firmer voice, she repeated, I'm expected. Expected by who? The staffer's confusion deepened. By who? He asked, professional, composed, clearly trying not to escalate the situation. Meghan's expression flickered. This was the moment her entire strategy faltered. Because she didn't have a name. She didn't have a host. She didn't have an invitation. She didn't have a publicist to flash credentials. She had nothing. Just an assertion, unsupported, unverified, unprepared. Her security exchanged uneasy glances. Her team looked panicked. The booing got louder. Phones rose higher in the crowd. Cameras zoomed in from every angle. She was on the brink of the most public rejection she'd ever experienced. And instead of reassessing, she doubled down. I need to be on the carpet, she insisted, voice thinner now, pressure rising. You're making a mistake. A mistake. The crowd caught those words instantly, echoing them with mocking shouts. You're making the mistake. This isn't your show. Go home, Meghan. She thinks she owns Hollywood. The chants mixed with laughter, with drumming boos, with that strange electricity that forms when a crowd collectively rejects someone and can feel the power of that rejection. But here's the twist. The staffer didn't budge. He didn't break. He didn't move aside. He held his ground with a quiet, professional strength that made the moment even more intense. He said, firmly, this is a private event. You cannot enter without authorization. And then, another staff member joined him. Then a third. Then security stepped closer. It became a wall, a human barrier between Meghan and the red carpet. She stared at them, stunned. Because this wasn't a PR crisis she could spin. This wasn't palace staff she could accuse. This wasn't a photographer whose images she could block. This wasn't a talk show host she could charm. This wasn't a social media critic she could ignore. This was Hollywood's decision. And they weren't budging. The awkwardness stretched like a rubber band pulled too tight. Everyone felt it. Her team, the press, the attendees, the crowd, even Meghan herself. It was a silent standoff. And then, something shifted. Meghan took a small step back. Not a retreat. Not a surrender. Just recalibration. Her eyes scanned the carpet. Then the photographers. Then the staff. Then the crowd. And you could almost see her thinking, how do I salvage this? How do I flip this? How do I regain control? But the more she searched for an opening, the clearer it became. There was none. Hollywood had closed its doors, and the crowd was thrilled to watch it happen. The staffers stood firm. Security positioned themselves even more defensively. The event PR manager hurried toward the scene, face tight with annoyance and disbelief. For a moment, a brief, chilling moment, the booing actually quieted. Not because the crowd softened, but because everyone sensed the tension was escalating into something surreal, something unprecedented, something no one expected to witness live. Meghan took a breath, lifted her chin, opened her mouth to speak again. But before she could, a voice cut through the noise behind her. Strong, clear, recognizable. A voice that instantly changed the energy around her. A voice that made the crowd react with a shockwave. A voice belonging to someone Meghan absolutely did not expect to see standing behind her, watching her attempt to storm the carpet. And what that person said, what that person confronted her with, would turn the entire standoff into a moment so tense, so humiliating, and so explosive, that even the staff on the carpet later said they wished cameras hadn't caught it. But cameras did. Every second, every angle, every word. And the confrontation that followed, it would make the booing look gentle. Have you ever watched a crowd turn into a single voice? Not dozens of scattered opinions, not a mix of cheers and whispers, but one unified, unrestrained reaction, as if every person in the space suddenly shared the same thought, the same frustration, the same instinct. That was the energy outside the American Cinematheque Awards the moment Meghan Markle tried to step onto that carpet. Because when that mystery voice confronted her, when she froze mid-step, eyes widening just for a heartbeat, the crowd sensed vulnerability. They sensed hesitation. They sensed the break in her armor. And once a crowd senses blood, even emotional blood, there's no stopping the momentum, no slowing it down, no silencing it. The boos didn't just continue. They evolved. What had been a loud, chaotic reaction transformed into something more coordinated, more charged, more emotionally fueled. Chanting started. Laughter erupted. Phones rose even higher. People stepped closer to capture the moment like tourists trying to photograph a rare animal sighting. And the sound, dear God, the sound, became a wave. A tidal wave crashing over Meghan from all angles. Have you ever tried standing in the ocean when a wave hits you sideways instead of head-on? That disorienting, helpless moment where the water doesn't just push, you feel it swallow you? That's what the boos became. They swallowed her. At first, Meghan tried to keep the same static expression she uses when she wants the world to think everything is under control. That calm half-smile, that practiced calmness, that composed, duchess-like aura she uses to appear untouchable. But that expression cracked. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just enough that people who were close enough to see it felt a shock. Her eyes twitched. Her jaw tightened. Her hand clenched briefly at her side. Because in that moment, something became painfully clear. This wasn't an awkward misunderstanding. This wasn't a minor PR mishap. This wasn't a divided crowd. This was a public verdict. And Meghan felt it. Her security team felt it. The event staff felt it. The press felt it. Every single person in that space understood that what was happening wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't one of those uncomfortable moments that fades within minutes. This was history in the making. A rare Hollywood moment where the public unified in a single, undeniable message. No, not today, not here, not like this. But the question that hung in the air was, why? Why did this crowd react so strongly? Why did the booing build instead of dying down? Why did people seem genuinely angry? Let's break down the emotional charge in the air. First, there's the issue of entitlement. Hollywood audiences, especially those who attend industry events, have a deeply ingrained sense of who has earned the right to stand on those carpets. They know the difference between someone who has built a career from years of dedication and someone who believes visibility alone is enough. Second, the Cinematheque crowd is different from tabloids or fan mobs. They're industry-adjacent, hardcore cinephiles, entertainment insiders, and people who value authenticity. To them, the red carpet is sacred in an artistic sense, not a space for reality TV-style chaos. Third, Meghan's brand has racked up years of tension, criticisms, contradictions, controversies. And while she still has supporters, this wasn't her crowd. This wasn't her demographic. This wasn't Oprah's backyard. This was the heart of Hollywood's old guard respect system. Fourth, The sheer audacity of trying to force her way in triggered something primal in the crowd. Not hatred, not cruelty, but a kind of collective boundary setting, as if they were saying, enough with the narrative hijacking, enough with the forced spotlight, enough with treating every space like a stage. And here's where irony enters the story like an unexpected twist. Meghan thought this crowd was her audience, but this crowd saw right through her. The boos crescendoed, the chants sharpened, the reactions grew more intense. One section of the crowd began yelling, "Not invited. You don't belong here. This is for real actors. Go home." Another section turned it into a rhythm. "Leave, leave, leave." And the cruelest section, the ones who used humor to amplify humiliation, started chanting, "Where's your invitation? Where's your invitation?" It was mockery. It was public correction. It was social backlash dressed as comedy. And no matter how Meghan tried to maintain composure, the energy cut through her like a blade. Imagine standing there, surrounded by cameras, surrounded by strangers, surrounded by a crowd whose rejection feels like a physical force, and still trying to appear regal, still trying to appear calm, still trying to appear in control. That's the tragedy of this moment. Because even in humiliation, Meghan tried to perform elegance. But elegance doesn't survive a tidal wave. Her team panicked. Her bodyguards closed in tighter. Her assistant whispered frantically, trying to pull her back toward the SUV. Her PR handler, the one who should have been controlling the situation, looked pale, sweaty, terrified. But Meghan refused to move. Why? What was she thinking? Was she hoping the booing would die down? Was she expecting someone, anyone, from the event to rush out and validate her presence? Or did she genuinely believe that if she held her ground long enough, she could reclaim authority? Because she stood there for several long, agonizing seconds, staring at the carpet she wasn't allowed to walk on, staring at the flashbulbs that weren't going off, staring at the staff who formed a human barricade against her. But then came the moment that took the humiliation from public rejection to full emotional devastation. The crowd started laughing. Not mocking laughter, not jeers, not chanting, real laughter. The kind of laughter that comes from disbelief. Like watching someone try to open a locked door they have no rightful access to. The kind of laughter that stings worse than insults. The kind of laughter that strips away the last layer of dignity. Her face froze. Her eyes darted. Her breath hitched. This was the moment where even her hardest defenders would admit she looked lost. Not powerful, not influential, not royal, not Hollywood, just lost. And that's when her security finally stepped closer, ready to escort her away for her own sake. But before they could touch her, she did something unexpected, something no one could believe, something that sent the crowd into another explosion of noise. She raised her hand, as if asking for silence, as if preparing to speak, as if she believed she still had the power to reclaim the narrative through sheer force of charisma. The crowd did not quiet down. In fact, the booing intensified the moment they realized she intended to talk. They didn't want words. They wanted action. They wanted her gone. They wanted the night to return to what it was supposed to be. And yet, she still tried to speak. She opened her mouth. She formed the first syllable. She took a breath. Then something happened that cut her sentence off instantly, stopping the words before they even formed. Someone stepped forward from the direction of the carpet. A recognizable figure. An A-lister. A respected presence. Someone who had earned Hollywood's loyalty over decades. Someone who absolutely did not appreciate this disruption. The crowd gasped. Security stiffened. Meghan's expression shifted into pure disbelief. Because the person walking toward her, the one who would confront her directly, was not an enemy from the tabloids, but someone from inside Hollywood itself. Someone with enough authority to speak on behalf of the entire event. And what that celebrity said next would push the confrontation into an entirely new level. A level so explosive that even Hollywood insiders would whisper about it for days afterward. Have you ever felt a room, or in this case, an entire outdoor entrance, shift when a single person steps forward? Not because they're loud, not because they're dramatic, not because they're causing chaos, but because their presence alone commands the air. That's what happened the moment the A-lister emerged from the red carpet and walked directly toward Meghan Markle. It was like a sudden drop in temperature, a tightening of the atmosphere, a ripple through the crowd so sharp that even the booing stalled for half a breath. Not because people wanted to hear Meghan. They didn't. They were done with her. But because they wanted to see who had the courage, the authority, the unspoken permission to walk right into the eye of the storm and confront the person creating it. And there he was, a heavyweight actor, a veteran of the industry. The kind of name that doesn't need introduction, PR stunts, or drama. A man who has worked with legends, survived decades of Hollywood politics, and built a reputation on authenticity and respect. He didn't walk fast. He didn't walk slow. He walked with purpose. And that purpose was aimed directly at Meghan. Even the photographers, who had been frozen in shock moments earlier, raised their cameras instinctively. Not to capture Meghan anymore, but to capture him. Because when a Hollywood giant steps into a situation, their body language becomes the headline. The crowd felt it first. That hush of anticipation. That, "Oh my God, is that who I think it is?" whisper. That collective moment when chaos is briefly overshadowed by authority. Meghan noticed too. Her posture changed. Not drastically. She would never allow herself to crumble publicly, but enough that anyone watching closely could see the shift. Her chin lowered slightly. Her eyes snapped away from the booing crowd and toward him. Her shoulders stiffened, not with confidence, but with bracing tension. Because she knew. This wasn't a fan. This wasn't staff. This wasn't security. This wasn't another bystander yelling from the sidelines. This was someone powerful enough that Meghan couldn't ignore him. Someone influential enough that Hollywood would listen. Someone respected enough to shut down whatever narrative she planned to push. When he finally stopped in front of her, the noise dipped again, just for a second, like the air itself wanted to hear what he had to say. He looked at her, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with disappointment. The type of disappointment you can't PR spin your way out of. The type that hits deeper than yelling ever could. And then he spoke. Calm, firm, clear. "You're not supposed to be here." That sentence cut the air like a blade. Not rude, not aggressive, not mocking, just factual, heavy, undeniable. A statement that echoed everything the crowd had been feeling but didn't have the authority to articulate. Meghan blinked. Once. Slowly. As if her mind needed an extra second to process the fact that an industry titan had just confronted her directly. Her mouth opened slightly, a reflex to respond, but he didn't give her the space. He continued, lower so only those closest could hear, but with a tone powerful enough that the crowd sensed the gravity behind it. "This is not your event. You need to leave." No one talked to Meghan Markle like that. Not in years. Not since she entered Hollywood again through the royal side door. Not since she built her public persona around being untouchable, misunderstood, and always somehow the victim of someone else's rules. But this wasn't Buckingham Palace. This wasn't Netflix. This wasn't Oprah's living room. This wasn't a curated documentary script. This was Hollywood's house. And Hollywood had just sent its messenger. Meghan's reaction was a study in contradictions. Her expression tightened. Her eyebrows lifted just enough to show offense. Her jaw clenched for half a second before she forced it to relax. And then, her voice came out soft, controlled, but with that hint of indignation she never manages to hide. "I was invited." A lie? A misunderstanding? A delusion? A strategic line she hoped would buy her sympathy? No one knows. But the actor's response was immediate. "No, you weren't." No wiggle room. No half-truths. No diplomatic phrasing. Just a hard stop. The crowd reacted instantly. Not with boos this time, but with gasps, and shouted commentary, and laughter that felt like knives. Because they heard the tone. They understood the subtext. This wasn't just a man telling Meghan she wasn't allowed in. This was Hollywood reminding her she didn't control the narrative here. Meghan's eyes flashed, not with tears, but with something sharper. Pride? Fury? Fear? Maybe all three. But she wasn't ready to retreat. Of course she wasn't. Meghan Markle does not step back when challenged. She steps forward. And she did. One small step. A symbolic step. A step that said she wasn't done. Her voice came again, slightly firmer this time. "There must be some misunderstanding. I'm supposed to walk the carpet. My team." He raised his hand. Not aggressively. Not rudely. Just enough to silence her. The crowd reacted like they'd watched someone slap a microphone out of a diva's hand. A mix of shock and thrill and disbelief. And he said something that froze her completely. "Stop. This isn't your moment. Don't make this worse." 5 words from earlier lingered in the air. "This isn't Your moment. And Meghan felt that. Because here's the truth. Meghan built her public persona around controlling the moment. Every interview, every speech, every red carpet, every headline. But tonight wasn't hers. And the crowd knew it. Hollywood knew it. The industry giant standing before her knew it. Her breath caught. Just slightly. But enough that the A-lister saw it. Then his tone sharpened, still calm, but with finality. You need to leave. Now. This wasn't a request anymore. This was a directive. Meghan's team panicked behind her. The assistants whispering. The bodyguards shifting. The PR handler tugging anxiously at her sleeve. But Meghan, she stood perfectly still. For a full 5 seconds. A long, tense, excruciating 5 seconds. As if she believed she could still salvage this. As if pride wouldn't let her walk away. As if she couldn't accept that the industry she once longed to rejoin was staring her down and rejecting her openly. And then, just as Meghan inhaled to speak again, the A-lister leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to deliver the sentence that would destroy whatever strategy she thought she had left. Don't make us remove you. Not loud. Not public. Just quiet enough to be lethal. Meghan froze. Her expression broke. For a millisecond. Just enough for people nearest her to catch the shift. Shock. Humiliation. Realization. The realization that she had lost control. Completely. Irrevocably. And the crowd reacted instantly, exploding into a roar of disbelief, whispers, cheers, laughter, commentary. Because they knew what they had just witnessed. Hollywood itself had rejected her. But the most devastating part of this entire confrontation wasn't the words spoken in that moment. It was what happened next. A leak, straight from inside the event. Something that proved the confrontation wasn't personal. It was policy. And once that leaked memo hit the internet, Meghan would no longer be able to claim misunderstanding, miscommunication, or victimhood. Because the memo revealed the truth. Something the organizers already knew. Something her team already suspected. Something Meghan herself feared. And it would blow the night open. Have you ever felt a moment shift from chaos to clarity? Not the calm after the storm kind of clarity, but the brutal, ice-cold realization that everything you just witnessed wasn't an accident, wasn't improvised, wasn't spontaneous at all. It was planned, decided, documented. That's what happened the moment the memo hit the internet. But before we get to the leak itself, let's rewind just a few minutes. Because context matters. And in this story, context is everything. Meghan was still standing at the edge of the red carpet, frozen in the aftermath of that confrontation with the A-lister. Her face was composed, too composed. It was the tight-lipped, rigid composure of someone trying to save face while the ground beneath them is giving way. The crowd was roaring. Cameras were everywhere. Her team was scrambling like paramedics trying to revive a patient who flatlined 5 minutes ago. But while that drama was erupting in real time, something else was happening behind the scenes, inside the venue, deep in the staff area, away from the noise, away from the crowd. Someone leaked the memo, and that leak didn't just expose a misunderstanding. It exposed the truth. Now picture this. Somewhere in a cramped back office space, a staffer who had already been exhausted from the night's chaos. Maybe a junior assistant, maybe a frustrated coordinator, maybe someone fed up with being blamed for the unfolding disaster, opened their phone. They scrolled. They watched the confrontation video flooding their feed. They saw Meghan demanding access. They saw the crowd booing. They saw security forming a barricade. And then they opened their email. And there it was. The memo. Subject line. Do not grant access. Non-invited individual. Subheading. Meghan Markle. Not cleared for entry. A staff-wide directive sent earlier in the day, complete with bullet points, timestamps, highlighted sections, and the kind of corporate phrasing that leaves nothing open to interpretation. Let's break down what the memo allegedly said, because this is where the entire night takes on a new dimension. At the top, in bold letters, no red carpet access to non-credentialed guests. Then, underneath, a list of individuals flagged as non-invitees who might attempt entry. Meghan Markle's name wasn't just on the list. It was the first name, and next to it, a note, a specific instruction, a line that made the internet erupt when the memo leaked. Do not permit entry under any circumstances. Any circumstances. Not verify credentials. Not redirect to will call. Not check with PR. Just don't let her in. Period. But that wasn't even the most explosive part. Under the note was an additional line, written by a senior official in the event's production team. Avoid engagement. Maintain professionalism. Direct all inquiries to the head of security. They were prepared. They were expecting trouble. They anticipated Meghan might try something, and they prepared the entire staff to shut it down. So when Meghan told the A-lister, "I was invited," the memo proved that wasn't just a lie. It was a calculated one. A line she hoped would pressure staff into compliance. A narrative she believed could override the truth. But truth has receipts. And Hollywood had just hit forward. Now imagine the staffer holding that memo, reading it again, watching the confrontation unfold on their phone, and thinking, she's lying publicly. She's causing chaos. And she's about to flip this on us unless someone shows the truth. A decision forms. Fast. You've seen it before. Someone tired of silence, tired of blame, tired of chaos. They screenshot the memo. All of it. The subject line, the body, the notes, the attachments, the timestamps. Then they send it. Maybe they leak it to a journalist. Maybe to a tabloid. Maybe to a Hollywood blogger. Maybe anonymously to Twitter. But within minutes, the memo explodes across the internet like a grenade. And suddenly, the narrative shifts. Not gently, not slowly, but violently. Because one thing the public hates more than controversy is entitlement mixed with dishonesty. Have you ever witnessed someone reach a breaking point so quietly, so subtly, that the shift almost goes unnoticed, until suddenly, their next move detonates the entire room? That's what happened in the moments after Meghan learned, without question, that she was not getting onto the red carpet. Because while most people would retreat, breathe, regroup, or at least save themselves from further embarrassment, Meghan did something else. Something no one, not even her own team, expected. She tried another entrance. And not just any entrance. The backstage entrance. But before we get to that explosive moment, let's pull back and examine the emotional pressure cooker she was standing in. Because understanding her decision means understanding the psychology behind it. Meghan had been booed. Publicly. Loudly. Mercilessly. She'd been blocked at the carpet. Denied by staff. Debunked by a leaked memo. Corrected by an A-lister. Stripped of narrative control. Every piece of the glossy, curated image she tries to maintain had been ripped apart in front of cameras. For someone who built an entire public identity on poise, grace, and control, this wasn't just embarrassing. This was identity-threatening. And when someone hits that point, pride takes the wheel. Pride overrides logic. Pride silences reason. Pride whispers one dangerous sentence. You can still win. And Meghan listened. Her team could sense it happening. They could see the tension building behind her composed expression. They whispered urgently, "Let's go back to the car. We should leave now. This isn't safe. This isn't salvageable." But she didn't move. Instead, she turned, not toward the car, not toward the crowd, not toward safety. She turned toward the side of the building. A small movement, barely noticeable, but enough that her bodyguards exchanged alarmed looks instantly. One stepped forward, blocking her path gently. "We need to exit, ma'am." Meghan ignored him. She walked right past her own security and headed toward a narrow pathway leading to the backstage corridor, a restricted area used only by honorees, event organizers, and internal staff. The crowd noticed immediately. She's trying another entrance. "Oh my God, look! She's going around. Is she serious?" And the booing? It didn't stop. It transformed. Now it was mixed with laughter. A brutal, mocking laughter that cut even deeper than the first wave. If the red carpet had been a rejection, the backstage attempt was desperation. And the crowd smelled it. Phones lifted again. The chant returned with new venom. "Go home. Go home. Go home. You're not invited. Stop embarrassing yourself." But Meghan kept walking. Head up. Steps sharp. Posture tense, but deliberate. Her team chased after her, literally jogging in heels and suits. Trying to catch up before something irreversible happened. "Meghan, wait. You can't go that way. This area is restricted. Security will stop you." But she didn't stop. And the closer she got to that side corridor, the more panicked the staff became. Because that entrance, unlike the red carpet, was narrow, unlit, and barely monitored under normal circumstances. It was a logistical entry point, not a performance space. A space filled with equipment, cases, sound wires, staff rushing between tasks. Not a place for a celebrity to walk through. And absolutely not a place for an uninvited celebrity to infiltrate. Two security guards stationed nearby noticed her approaching and instantly stiffened. They stepped forward, hands raised, stances firm. "Ma'am, you cannot enter this area," one said forcefully. But Meghan didn't back up. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften. She said something that made the guards look at each other in disbelief. "I have people waiting for me inside." A claim, a bluff, a threat. No one could tell. But whatever she meant by it, it had zero effect on the guards. "This area is off limits," the second guard repeated. "Turn around." Her jaw tightened. Her eyes hardened. She stepped forward anyway. Her team gasped. One assistant practically squeaked, "Meghan, please. Stop." But she didn't. She tried to walk between the guards. A move so bold, so defiant, so shockingly out of touch with reality that even the booing crowd grew momentarily quiet. Not out of respect, but out of stunned astonishment. Did she really think she could physically force her way into the back entrance of an event that had already publicly denied her? Apparently, yes. One guard stepped in front of her again, blocking her with his full body weight. "Ma'am, stop." Meghan glared. Her voice dropped into a low, cold register. "You are making a mistake." The guard didn't flinch. "No," he said, "we're following protocol." And then, this is where the moment turned cinematic. A walkie-talkie crackled loudly on the guard's belt. A voice came through, urgent and clipped. "Do not let her in." Repeat. "Do not let her in." Director approval. Stand firm. Everyone heard it. Meghan heard it. Her team heard it. The crowd, who had grown quiet enough to listen, heard it. The final nail. She wasn't just being denied. She was being denied from the inside, by the highest authority in the event. Her face cracked, this time noticeably. Her mouth tightened. Her nostrils flared. Her eyes glistened, just a hint, quickly suppressed. But it was too late. Cameras caught it. The crowd saw it. Her team panicked. One assistant tried to stand between her and the guards, whispering frantically, "You're going to make this worse. Please, please, stop. Let's go. Let's leave now." But Meghan wasn't ready to be defeated. So she tried one final move. She reached out, not to touch the guards, not to push past them, but to point toward the corridor, as if she could command entry simply by gesturing at it. And she stepped forward again. That was the moment security acted. Not aggressively, not violently, but decisively. Two guards formed a physical barrier.